Well, good morning and welcome back to the BRN Sunday podcast. I'm Jeff Snyder, your host. I'll be joined by members of media, academia, and financial services as we go around the globe to discuss the issues related to retirement markets, technology, personal finance, so much more. We've got another great show for this week, and we've got a very special guest. I'll be joined later on in the program by Julie Hall. She is better known as the Estate Lady, and she's out with a new book, Inheriting Clutter, How to Calm the Chaos Your Parents Leave Behind. I can't wait for this interview. So sit back and relax and enjoy this episode of the BRN Sunday podcast. Well, let's kick things off with a look at tech. And joining me on the line from West Palm, Florida, Daniel Klein, Senior Technology and Consumer Products Reporter with The Motley Fool. Hey, Dan, how are you?
I'm good, Jeff. How are you?
Fine. You have a good week?
It was a weird one. We had our first 3 days of no work. So it was, someone who works every day, you get into a rhythm. And when it stops, it's almost like it's rewarding, but it's also kind of empty.
Yeah, well, it's okay. It's okay to take some time off. And I think you're getting out of Dodge. Are you going on vacation this weekend or doing something with the family?
No, so I'm meeting one friend, and
okay.
I'm driving to South Carolina. I was going to fly, but the airlines are so, I don't want to say messed up, but they've moved their itineraries around so much that I could either take a flight with one stop with a very tight connection I probably would have missed, or a flight with like a 5 or 6 hour break in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at the math and went, wait a minute, it's only about 10 hours away. I guess I'll just drive.
Wow. Okay. Well, this sounds like a plan, and maybe driving is a good way to cerebrally relax. Maybe you can listen to an audiobook or listen to your favorite podcast from The Motley Fool or BRN.
Absolutely. I'm going to catch up on a ton of podcasts.
Good for you. So let's jump in. Lots going on in the tech world. We had a great conversation last week on the podcast on BRN Sunday, and also you appeared on the network on Tuesday. What's top of mind for you and the folks at Motley this week?
So one of the big stories is Uber bought Postmates in an all-stock deal. And this is, after they failed to buy Grubhub, this is an attempt to consolidate the delivery space. And I don't know. I don't feel very good about this deal.
So I didn't even know who Postmates was. So they're a delivery service. Uber getting into the business, or they had Uber Eats, right? But then they downsized Uber Eats. And am I right on that, Dan? So they downsized Uber Eats, and now they're buying somebody else to further
No, they didn't downsize Uber Eats. They're going full in on Uber Eats. They're actually going to start delivering groceries. Basically,
Okay.
Postmates is strong in places where they're weak. They have good penetration in cities. It gives them more market share. It, in theory, gives them more restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not, in my opinion, this is doubling down on a money-losing business. Basically, the restaurants can't afford to pay the bounties they want in exchange for a delivery, and customers don't want to pay, maybe we'll pay a $3.99 add-on fee. We don't want to pay much more than that. At some point, it just becomes easier to just go get it yourself.
Yeah, my wife and I have been cooking a lot more. We tried to do, I think back at the beginning of the pandemic, we tried to do more of the fresh direct, Whole Foods, pick up food or have it delivered. Really had a hard time with that. So we kind of went back to the old fashioned, we're going to cook some sweet potatoes, make a salad, stuff like that. I wonder if more of America is doing that. I mean, it's so cost prohibitive, Dan, to order from your favorite restaurant. I mean, unless you have the discretionary income, a lot of Americans are struggling out there to do that.
Yeah, I mean, so the demand picture has definitely improved. You can get delivery slots. I did an Instacart order within 2 hours earlier this week. But yeah, some of us, I'm lucky. I'm not only doing financially well during the pandemic, I also haven't been traveling or doing many of the things I spend money on. So it hasn't really felt like a luxury to order an expensive dinner because I'm not going out for expensive dinners. This trip I'm taking this week will really be my first trip other than between the two places we live in 5 months. So to me, restaurant meals right now, delivery based, feel like something that I'm almost entitled to. But going forward, as we have more of a normal economy, I think people will be tight. And look, there are about 10 different delivery players in my market.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that Uber and Postmates being one, whether they stay separate apps or they combine and become one app, I'm not sure I see the advantage of this. There's obviously some back office savings. You don't need two development teams. You don't need two CFOs, all that kind of stuff. But I don't really see what they get here. And again, Jeff, you probably remember the 80s. We had the first round of delivery companies. They were like phone-based, and it was really complicated. And of course, it didn't work. I'm not sure technology solves that problem.
Yeah, Dan, I do remember the 80s very well. What does this mean for very well? Big Hair, Terminator, Miami Vice. But what does this mean for Uber's ride-sharing business, Dan? I mean, is this a distraction? Uber, as far as I know, and again, you're tracking some of these stocks closer than I am. These companies track closer than I am, but they have been doing too well. What does this all mean for them?
Yeah, so Uber's ride business is a mess too. They underpriced, and now they face competition in Lyft that also underprices. So there's no easy way to raise the price.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So it's one of those scenarios where I'm not sure this business can work. There's a need for rideshare, and I think they're banking it on autonomous driving. And I have a colleague who, yesterday on one of my shows said, there'll be autonomous driving in 5 years. It'll be widespread. I don't believe that. I feel like the bar for a self-driven car is way higher than a human-driven car. So if you say there are 3 fatal accidents, and I'm making this number up, but it's somewhere in this ballpark, per every 1,000 drivers with people driving, and there's only one with robots driving, that one with robots driving is magnified. It's going to seem worse. You essentially have to have no accidents before this will be acceptable, and I just don't see it. I think autonomous driving will come to closed loops like university campuses and Disney World and other places like that, but I don't think it's going to be the savior for Uber. And look, there either has to be consolidation or somebody has to go out of business.
Yeah, or you have to pivot and kind of get into something else, which sounds like they're kind of more in the delivery and the grocery, getting in that direction. So we'll see how it kind of fleshes out. Dan, let's talk a little Disney. Obviously, or not obviously, but some of the Disney parks, or one of the Disney parks, I think, is reopening this month. Another one, I think, in California may be delayed. But also Disney Plus seems to really be thriving. Why don't you weigh in on Disney a little bit?
Yeah, so Disney World opens for pass holders. I think there might be previews today and tomorrow, but I know definitely tomorrow. That's going to be a very limited test. And then on the 11th, 2 of the parks, Disney World and Animal Kingdom, open up at about 30% capacity with a reservation-based system. I'll tell you, as an annual pass holder, they set aside some reservations for annual pass holders, and I didn't get up first thing in the morning to do it. So I got my 3 allotted reservations, a couple in July, 1 in August after the kids go back to school, so I guess I'll be going myself. And the system was fine. And I'm 100% confident that Disney will do this right. I've been to Disney Springs a number of times. They're enforcing that you wear a mask. They're doing social distancing really well in the restaurants. Things like limiting contact, like free refills. They come around with a pitcher, so they don't have to throw away your cup to take it back. Really smart things, paper menus in cases of pushing people to order through their app, which is really smart. I'm 100% confident that in the mess that is Florida, and I live in Florida, that Disney is going to be the safest place to be, and that's good for them. But from a business point of view, think of it this way. They're going to go from losing money on the theme parks to likely breaking even to eventually, when they can get to a slightly higher capacity, maybe making a slight profit. This is an area that was enormously profitable.
Well, Dan, I was going to ask you, is it my understanding, and I could be wrong, but the NBA, aren't they going to one of the Disney properties as well to relaunch their season, if I'm not mistaken?
The NBA is going to take over 3 hotels and ESPN's Wide World of Sports. It's about $150 million deal. So,
wow.
It's nice money for Disney, but it's certainly not all that relevant given the current thing. But it's going to be an absolute commercial, assuming it goes well. And I think what we have to look at is, there are going to be positive tests. We're seeing it as baseball, as other sports start to test. There'll be positive tests. People will quarantine, then they will get back to playing. That might impact some games, but I do think they're going to get their season in. The biggest fear you have here is the unlikely but possible scenario where someone contracts it and gets really sick. If a high-profile athlete gets – now, so far, the athletes who've caught it have generally been mild cases. They're in really good shape. They're athletes, but there's obviously some older coaches. There is some risk here, but I do think this is going to be a nightly, really solid commercial for Walt Disney World. And I'm bullish on Disney, and Disney Plus has been growing like gangbusters.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because, we talk about streaming all the time, Dan. I think when I think of Disney Plus, I think of The Mandalorian, and I think of my favorites from my childhood, The Black Hole, things like that. But how is it growing? It's got to be growing like wildfire.
Yeah, so the last time they gave us numbers, which was a while ago, it was at 54 million people, which is something like their 2024 prediction. So it's obviously the pandemic has accelerated growth, but frankly, I thought their predictions were too conservative anyway. Once they announced a live-action Star Wars show, I felt like they were going to get a lot of people, and the fact that The Mandalorian was really good accelerated that. But this week, last Friday actually, they put up Hamilton. This was supposed to be a theatrical release. It was a filmed version of the stage play with the original cast. And I knew this was going to be huge when my mom called me and said, "How do I get Disney Plus?" And I had to explain to her that she didn't go through her television. She had to go through her Amazon Fire device. And she signed up for Disney Plus and has probably watched Hamilton, I don't know, a dozen times, as have all her friends. I'd be surprised if they didn't add another 15 to 20 million people just for this. And this took a movie that cost them $100 million to make. It probably would have done, 300 million in domestic box office. I don't know that it would have a lot of global appeal. And it pushed those subscribers to Disney Plus, which may end up being worth more than had those people seen the movie in the theater, because most of them, my mom's not going to quit at the end of the month. She probably doesn't even know how to do that. And my guess is when she sees all the other things that are available on Disney Plus, maybe she will catch up with the Marvel movies or start watching Simpsons episodes or who knows what. But Disney Plus is a resounding hit, and it hasn't even launched in much of the world. So I would expect by the end of the year, I would not be surprised if Disney Plus was 100 million people, and we do a show called CEO for a Day where you get to pretend you're the CEO of a company. And one of the things I suggested is Disney should raise its price. They should basically tell you if you sign up before the end of the year, you can lock in this price for another year. But if you don't sign up before the end of the year, it's $9.99 a month. And then that's effectively announcing a price raise for a year from January for everyone who's on it. This service is very inexpensive. They have amazing stuff coming out, and they have much lower content costs than Netflix. Not that they're not spending big money on shows, but when you do a show in the Star Wars universe, when you take popular Marvel characters like Hawkeye or the Vision or some of the other characters they've talked about, Loki, doing shows with, those are guaranteed hits. Whereas when Netflix makes a show, you don't know if anyone's going to see it, even if it's based on a name property. There's a lot more risk for Netflix than there is for Disney Plus. I love that part of the business.
Yeah, when I do, I think Disney Plus is what, $69.99 for the full year? Is that right?
It's $6.99 a month, and you get, I forget the exact price for the year, but you basically get a 2-month deal if you subscribe.
So if you just multiply it times 54 million, I mean, you're talking about, if I'm correct, you're talking about $4 billion in revenue, and they haven't even scratched the surface. I mean, it's just amazing. And I was, just going back to The Mandalorian for a second, because I do love that show, and that's why I specifically got Disney Plus, although my niece and nephew can also watch it as well. In that The Mandalorian, they have some really interesting filming techniques where instead of a green screen like they traditionally do with these Hollywood movies, Avengers and whatnot, they actually have a big digital screen, Dan, where they can project the background. It's you have to see this. It's unbelievable.
I'd like to see it. It's absolutely amazing. And look, I think The Mandalorian was the best show on television this year. And admittedly, I haven't watched many shows, so that's probably not fair at all for me to be saying. But I look at the lineup of what's coming out. People ask, well, do they have to worry about Peacock? Do they have to worry about HBO Max? So I'm an HBO subscriber, so I get HBO Max. And I figured out how to connect my account and log in. And I realized that the only things on HBO Max that I wanted to watch were things that I already had access to for DC Universe. Mm-hmm. I paid for DC Universe a year in advance. That's part of HBO Max now. I probably could go back and cancel, but instead I'll just make sure I don't renew. And there's a couple of shows. There's a Battlestar Galactica reboot coming to HBO Max. Gosh. But I can't say there's anything I'm excited about on that platform that isn't just something I watch on HBO anyway. So I think, whereas Disney, if you look at the lineup for like the next 3 years, I'm salivating over a bunch of things. Disney Plus a couple years from now is going to be Netflix big with way lower content costs and a pipeline of theatrical releases that either will get people, they'll either wait until it comes to Disney Plus or they'll be excited to watch it again. I know I've watched the recent Avengers movie, not on Disney Plus, but I saw it in the theater twice, and I've seen it 3 or 4 other times start to finish on cruise ships. There's a lot of rewatchability in Disney properties.
Yeah, I'm wondering if when they'll get to a point where they do a virtual ride. Like, you go on It's a Small World and you can get that on the Disney Plus platform probably soon at some point. Dan, always a pleasure chatting with you and looking forward to chatting with you again on the network on Tuesday.
Looking forward to it.
Welcome back. We're going to talk a little personal finance. Tax day is coming up, and I couldn't think of a better person to talk about taxes in general and what you need to do. We've got Mari Backman on the line. She's a personal finance reporter with The Motley Fool. Hi, Mari. How are you?
Hi, Jeff. I'm doing okay. How are you?
Fine. How's your summer going?
Summer's going. We're learning. We're playing. We're going to the beach. And by we, I mean the kids are kind of learning to hack it on their own a little bit in the absence of online school, keeping them busy a few hours a day because they know that their mom needs to work. So, we're chugging along. No major complaints.
Well, good. I know it can be challenging at times, but glad you made some time for us today. So as I said in my your intro, tax day is this coming Wednesday, and I know you've got some tidbits and tips for us, and also what we need to be thinking about if we can't afford to pay our tax bill, which could be a possibility.
Exactly. So, the tax deadline is July 15th. The IRS pushed it back 3 months back in March when it realized, with the COVID situation, that people weren't exactly going to be sitting down to focus on taxes when there's this major crisis going on. So they pushed the April 15th deadline all the way back to July 15th, which seemed like a long time at the time. And now, of course, a lot of people are waking up and saying, oh, my gosh, that's next week. Mm-hmm. And I won't lie, Jeff, even though I write about this stuff for a living, I only finalized my tax return just the other day. So if you've stalled on your taxes, you're in good company. Just get moving. Yep. But like you said, Jeff, so most people who file a tax return do wind up with a refund, but then there are those people who owe. And owing money is a tough thing under normal circumstances. And this year, what with a lot of people having income loss and other financial issues due to the COVID crisis, owing money this year is probably not a great place to be in. So what do you do if you owe money? I want to talk about one thing not to do, and then I'm going to tell you what to do.
Okay.
The one thing not to do if you owe money is don't request an extension thinking that it'll buy you more time to pay. So if you can't complete your tax return by the deadline, you are allowed to request an extension. You don't even really need a reason. It's not like you need a justifiable reason like, oh, I'm missing this tax document or I had this illness. If you request one, the IRS will give you one. You normally get an extra 6 months with an extension. This year, that 6 months dates back to April 15th, so that if you can't get your taxes done by July 15th, you fill out an extension form and you get till October 15th.
Okay.
That's all fine and good, but it won't actually give you more time to pay your tax bill. All it does is gives you more time to file that return. And here's why that's important. If you don't owe any money on your taxes and you're late with your tax return, it's no big deal. It just means that you're delaying your own refund. And frankly, the IRS is not all that upset about that. But if you owe the IRS money and you don't file your taxes on time, you'll be hit with a failure to file penalty that's actually pretty costly. So if you don't have your taxes ready and you think you'll owe money, definitely get that extension because then at least you'll avoid that penalty. But that's not really what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is you've done your taxes, you're sitting on them, you're about to submit them, you see, I owe the IRS $2,000, I don't have $2,000. Oh, let me just get an extension. It gives me till October 15th. Nope, it does not give you extra time to pay. So I just want to make it very clear that that is not a solution.
Okay, that's really good to know. But I'm still wondering, what if you're out of work, you're just trying to make ends meet, Mari, and you don't have the money? I mean, what do you do? What do you do? I mean,
okay.
you get to the 15th, even if you delay to the 15th, you still don't have the money. A lot of Americans
Right.
still out of work. What do you do?
Right. Okay, so the first thing is you don't panic. So an extension is not a solution, but you don't panic because the IRS is pretty much, this was even before the COVID crisis, the IRS is willing to work with taxpayers who can't pay a tax bill right away. And look, the agency also acknowledges that, as much as everyone can hate on the IRS, the tax system is not perfect. In a perfect world, things would just, work out evenly, right? So that, you fill out your withholding at the beginning of the year and, you earn your money and you pay your taxes out of your paycheck and you just break even. You wind up paying exactly what you're supposed to. The IRS recognizes that, different quirks and scenarios can result in a situation where you owe some money and you can't pay it all right away. So in that case, it's very simple. You go to the IRS's website and you set up what's called an installment plan. It's basically a payment plan, just, kind of how like sometimes you buy a couch and you pay it off over 24 months. You figure out what you owe the IRS and you get on a payment plan where basically you're paying a portion of your tax bill each month instead of having to come up with a lump sum. That takes a lot of the pressure off. It also helps you avoid the severe consequences that come with ignoring a tax bill. Because if you owe the IRS money and you say, oh, you know what, I don't have the money at all. I guess I'm just not going to pay it. I'm not going to do anything. If you don't reach out and get on a payment plan, the IRS can eventually start coming after your wages. Yeah. The IRS can actually go in and garnish your wages if you're just ignoring the problem. So you don't want to do that. What you want to do is get on one of these installment plans, and then basically you'll pay it off over time. You'll pay a modest fee to set it up, though there's provisions for lower earners in that regard. Mm-hmm. And then you will continue to accrue interest on the sum that's not paid. And you'll even accrue a penalty, like a late payment penalty, but you won't risk wage garnishment, basically as long as you're in compliance with that plan. So if you owe some money, don't panic. You'll be able to pay it off over time.
Yeah, I mean, I got to think that well, like I said, I think there are a lot of people that are in this situation, so they're going to be getting some phone calls, and it's like when you don't pay your landlord, if you can't pay your landlord your rent, you pay what you can and try to work something out. The worst thing you can do is stick your head in the sand like an ostrich and not do anything. That's the worst thing because it looks like you're just not doing anything. The best thing you can do is just to do outreach, right, and try to work with somebody. And that really probably would be with all creditors. You don't want someone to go after and garnish your wages. Then you've got more problems. So the thing that people need to do, number one, get your taxes done, and that that's really important. But number two, make sure that you're staying in communication with people, the people that you owe money to, and try to work something out. I think people will be, especially given the circumstances, will be more understanding than at any time before.
Exactly. Whether it's the IRS or another creditor, exactly. The key is to actually just reach out and ask for help. Though I do want to point out one other thing, Jeff. Some people think, oh, okay, well, as is the case when you're in a scenario where there's anything you can't pay, whether it's your taxes or you can't pay off a medical bill, a lot of people have a tendency to just whip out a credit card and say, okay, well, I have this line of credit. Yeah. I can't pay this bill, so I'll put it on my credit card because I'm allowed to pay my credit card company over time. I don't recommend that in a situation where you owe money on taxes because often the fees and interest that you'll pay on your credit card for paying it off over time, that will exceed the fees and interest you'll pay under an IRS installment agreement. And if you rack up too high a credit card balance, it could actually damage your credit score, and then you could have trouble borrowing money when you need to when you're in a pinch. So for anyone who's thinking, oh, okay, well, let's say you owe $2,000. I don't have $2,000, but I have a $2,000 line of credit, so I'll just charge it on my credit card, and I'll pay the minimum balance for the next year or two or three. Don't do that. That's not a good solution either.
Yeah, I think, thinking about this, I mean, you mentioned the word panic, and I just have to think that these are obviously very challenging times for people, and the mental pain that people are feeling, not just the physical pain from the being at home or dealing with COVID. I mean, that's a big part of financial wellness and being able to handle your finances. You got to be in the right mental state, and I think that's often an underlooked part of financial fitness and financial wellness, Mari.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I'm sure there's data out there. I don't have a study, off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's data out there, pointing to the fact that when we're undergoing personal stress or, or health-related stress or just other stress, I'm sure it impacts our ability to make smart financial decisions one way or another.
Yeah. Do you have a feel, Maury, people who are working on preparing their taxes, are they using more tax preparing services like a Quicken or an actual CPA? Are they doing it themselves? I mean, any feel as you're doing a lot of research for your stories, what people lean to now?
I'm not really seeing anything in particular. I think people are mostly doing what they're used to. Reason being that, the whole lockdown situation, these days you don't need to sit in front of an accountant or a tax prep person to have that person help you with your taxes. Mm-hmm. I've done my taxes for a few years now without actually sitting in my accountant's office. He's a great guy, but with his office being 30 minutes away, we could just do an online conference, and he's got a portal where I can upload all of my tax docs securely, and mm-hmm. that way I don't have to drag him over to his office. He doesn't have to make copies of everything. So the good news is I don't necessarily think the pandemic is changing or has to change the way people file taxes. But to that point, actually, Jeff, whenever you trigger something in my head where I think I can help people, I've got to run with it. So sure. I will just say this. For those people who haven't yet finished their taxes, if you're still working on it and you normally file your taxes on paper, don't do that this year, especially if you're owed a refund, because the IRS has to physically process paper returns. Right now, the IRS does not have its field offices up and running, at least not in full capacity, because they closed everything down when the pandemic hit. So just like a lot of people are working from home, so are the IRS agents. So if you file a paper return this year and want to get your refund quickly, you're going to be waiting a long time. Normally, under best circumstances, the IRS says 6 weeks for a refund on a paper return, whereas it's 3 weeks for returns filed electronically. But this year it's apt to be even longer than that. So if you want that money, don't file on paper. Look into filing electronically. It's actually pretty, if your taxes aren't complicated, it's pretty easy, and the error rate for electronic filings is actually way lower than the error rate for paper. So it's really beneficial to do that anyway.
Yeah, really good tips, and I think it probably answers a lot of questions, Maury, people are having now. They're probably got their fists clenched and really nervous about this. I think you kind of allayed a lot of fears. Always great. So. I hope so as well. Maury, always a pleasure chatting with you. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, and we will talk to you again very soon.
Sounds great. Take care.
Welcome back. We've got a very special guest. She is known as the estate lady. I'm talking to Julie Hall. Julie, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
This couldn't be. You've got a new book out. It's called Inheriting Clutter: How to Calm the Chaos Your Parents Leave Behind. And Julie, this couldn't come at a more important time with everything that's going on with this pandemic and unfortunately people losing their lives. And now's the time, I think, that people should really get their act together when it comes to their estate plan, because there are a lot of pieces to this that I know you cover in the book.
There are many moving pieces to it, and the pandemic is just an additional reason why we should be preparing. But, in my almost 30 years of being in the industry, you would be amazed at how many people, especially in the Great Depression generation, as well as boomers, have not planned for the inevitable. And when I say that, I mean they don't even have a will. They haven't discussed allocations with children. They haven't discussed their finances. Are they in debt? Can they live comfortably? So there are many different layers to this onion.
Yeah. So let's kind of break it down, because I agree there are a lot of layers, and I don't have your level of expertise, and just thinking about my own family and making sure that my parents are very well prepared people, but I want to make sure that they are prepared for the future and that our family is prepared. So what are some of the takeaways, the things that we really need to be thinking about as we peel back that onion of estate planning?
I think one of the most important things that we really need to think about is, the adult children of the elderly. I'm one of them. I'm a boomer child. We really need to begin those courageous conversations with mom or dad before mental or physical infirmity can take place. And the reason for these open dialogues is simply to find out what are their wishes, what do they want as they head into the later portion of their lives. A lot of the children are left to guess. And I have seen what happens when those children have to guess, and they live with guilt, they live with resentment. Mm-hmm. So I think it all begins with getting the siblings on the same page, talking to mom and dad, which is no easy task because this is a generation that's known as the silent generation. But it's important to come from a place of care and compassion.
Yeah, I mean, and I would imagine it's better to start early than wait later on. You mentioned about the onset of certain impairments, mental impairments. It really is important to always have that. I think number one, it's always important to have an open dialogue with our parents and parents with their children. And I still call my parents every day and talk to them, and I look to them for guidance. I mean, I'm still at age 48. I need help and guidance, but I think we have a good relationship. But I think that it's better to start early than wait until the last minute.
So imagine, if you will, and how fortunate you are to have a wonderful relationship with your parents, as did I, who neither one of mine are with us any longer. Mm-hmm. But imagine if something happened to one or both of them. In my case, both my mother and my father died suddenly without warning and a few months apart. So how fortunate we were that my mom and dad did make those plans, did talk to their children, and everything had been prepared, pre-planned. And unfortunately, when that phone call comes, and it will come, whether someone falls or someone passes away, the children are often left and they're floundering. They're in a crisis mode. When you're in a crisis mode, you make very hasty decisions and bad mistakes happen. And,
I'm just thinking about, it actually makes me a little sad, your last comment, because the time will come, and I think that is often hard. I think that's one of the reasons why people often are like ostriches in the sand. They say, I don't want to think about this, right? But, I think about what can happen if you don't plan ahead. And then you hear all these horrible stories about things going to probate, right? And maybe we should talk about that. Like, what happens if you don't plan? Because you don't want to find out after a parent passes away that the state gets involved. There's all these other requirements. What happens if you don't plan?
Well, first I need to just tell you and your listeners I'm certainly not a lawyer, but
Sure.
I've hung around enough to know that, if you don't have a plan in place, if you don't have like a basic will, and let's say you die in debt, which is not a good idea. I mean, probate usually takes some time. It could take a few months to 2 years, where the settlement of the estate will be delayed because they have to contact any creditors that might be owed money, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not just that, though. It goes a lot deeper than that, Jeff. When there's no plan, when there's no guidance system, and mom and dad did not leave you any kind of map, you don't know what their advance directives are for their health care. In my case, I did, and I had to make a decision. But, I knew what they wanted. Also, siblings often have completely different, polar opposite opinions of what should happen. And so you start to see the contention and the estrangement begin. And we haven't even touched the stuff that mom and dad leave behind. I mean, that's really the crux of what I do and what I have seen in all of these years, when the children just fight because they didn't discuss the allocation of personal property. They didn't maybe even gift ahead of time while they were still living, which is a brilliant idea. Does anybody know where their documents are? Do they even have documents? Does anybody know the passwords, the keys, any kind of codes? These are the things that once a loved one passes away, you cannot get this information. So the children are left scrambling. I see them angry, upset, resentful. This is not a good legacy to leave.
And it's not a good legacy. I mean, the emotions are probably at their high point. You're in mourning, right? I mean, you know, we all deal with our
Yes.
grief in different ways. Some of us are sad. Some of us get angry. Some of us get sad and then get angry. But you make some really interesting points that I'd like to talk a little bit more about. You know, these personal directives. You know, what to do. You know, I think about like do not resuscitate, those types of things. You know, how to handle certain medical situations as you were discussing. That sounds really important. And then you also made a comment about didn't know the code, and I would probably think that there has to be something around your emails and if they use Facebook or something like your digital footprint. That's something that a lot of people, you know, people my parents' age, they use technology. They use FaceTime. My mom's really ahead of the curve when it comes to that. Those are things that you need to plan for as well.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right, because once a person passes away, their social imprint is still floating around out there. Especially, you know, a lot of people forget on Facebook, they forget to close down that account or that page. You know, for example, when I was planning my estate after my husband died, you know, my brother is my executor. I made sure he had everything. I actually wrote him like 6 pages of instructions. And these are my passwords, and if they change, I'll let you know. Because I wanted him to not struggle, to not have to jump through many hoops, because I know what it's like to go through that grief.
Yeah.
And when you're grieving and you don't have the answers, and another thing to take into consideration, Jeff, most of the adult children are still actively working. We still have a very busy life.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of the children struggling because they have to take vacation time to handle their parents' estates.
Wow.
And flying back and forth across the country, especially if they're geographically remote, which is often the case. And these are all things to take into consideration.
Yeah. What about newly married couples? My wife and I just got married 2 years ago, but that's a change, right? I had a will that I created. Not planning to go anywhere soon, anytime soon, but could happen. But what about things that if you are, because I feel like what we're talking about doesn't just happen at the end of life. It is important to have it at the end of life, but these are things you need to be thinking about all throughout your life. Just like on our show, on our network, we talk about retirement and savings, but it's a lot more than that. It's about your health care. It's about you know, the college tuition that you're gonna, if you have children, that you're gonna spend on, and the estate and how you manage your estate and how you handle your will goes through all phases of your life, right? I mean, you should really start that. You should start that on the front end and think about your life and what you want. And as you go through life's changes, you adapt your plan to if you take on a spouse or a wife or a husband or a partner, right?
Yes. I think you're 100% right, but this is the perfect world you're talking about. And
I'm an idealist.
Well, I think it's a wonderful way to be, but did you know that 50% of us, and it's probably closer to 55% of the people in this country do not have a will?
That's unbelievable.
So if the next time you're sitting at your holiday table, look at the person to your left and to your right, and chances are pretty good they don't have wills. Wow.
That's that's a shocking statistic. And, you know, it leaves me, I mean, I don't know if that's part of that. You know, we talk a lot about financial literacy. I would incorporate this into my financial literacy. I would, in terms of curriculum and getting people to understand not only managing a budget, but having the importance of having a will, the importance of transitioning assets, how you accrue wealth over time. And I'm not talking about you have to have $1 billion. I'm talking about just a little sum of money, how you're going to split that up. Because the last thing you want to do is create another great schism in your family, and not talk to your children, not talk to your brother and sister. I mean, that would just be a horrific result of someone's death.
And this is what I see in 80% of my cases. 80%. The children not only don't speak to each other the week of the funeral, it goes on that way because they begin the game of, but Mom said I could have this. No, Dad said I could have this. Or he said, she said. And they can't quite get over that hump and turn the other cheek. When in reality, myself looking in, it's just a thing that ultimately you can't take with you either.
Yeah.
And I realize it may have great sentimental value, but it has sentimental value to you. Will it have sentimental value to your children and grandchildren? Probably not, because they don't have the same attachment.
Yeah.
And so we see people making mistakes, spending thousands of dollars putting things in storage for grandchildren that are still in elementary school, who I guarantee you will not want those things when they come of age.
Yeah, let me tell you, my mom still has my Legos and my Weeble Wobbles, and my niece and nephew, I think, play a little bit when they come to see my mom. But she also has my Army Men, and I don't think kids play with my little green Army Men that I used to spend hours setting up. I don't think that kids play with that. Let's talk about personal property a little bit more. Selling the home, if someone or apartment or condo, or getting rid of those personal items. I mean, that's a hard thing to do. I have heard when my grandparents passed away, my parents had to go through some of the personal items. That's a tough thing as well, knowing what to keep, what to get rid of, and then selling property, not easy either.
Mm-hmm. No, the whole thing is a daunting task. The kids walk into the home for the first time after either mom has been put into a different living situation, or mom and dad have died, and they walk into the home, and the first question is, where do I begin? This is very real, and this is very paralyzing, and it zaps these adult children right between the eyes, because suddenly they realize, oh my gosh, there's 60 years accumulation of stuff in this house, maybe more if you include previous generations, because our parents' generation did inherit from the previous generation. So when you trickle it down to an adult child, we're dealing with mom and dad's, grandma and grandpa, Aunt Bertha, and great Uncle Joe's stuff. So what does that mean to us? What has value? Do we sell it, donate it, keep it, discard it? And that's when a professional, someone like myself, who can walk through the estate, can very quickly, usually within 2 or 3 hours, determine what has value, what doesn't have value in the estate, and help the children make decisions. Yes, it's okay to let it go. No, I think I'd like to hold on to that. This is one of the biggest mistakes that I see, is the children either throwing things in the trash or having a yard sale or giving it away, and they don't know what it's worth. And believe me, I've seen some very costly mistakes.
I'm sure. I mean, if you don't know, if you're not educated and you're ignorant to what you need to do, you're going to make mistakes. It's just, and you could be the most brilliant person in the world, you're going to make mistakes. One of the things I didn't say when I introduced you, Julie, and my apologies to you for not doing that, but people can check out Julie's website. It's theestatelady.com, and I'm looking at the site now, Julie. I mean, there are articles, there's in products, endorsements, services. I mean, there's valuable expertise around valuations. How do you do it all? And each and every day. I mean, it's a pretty well encompassed website.
Well, I have split myself many different ways because I wanted my clients, near and far, to be able to have what they need from me. And if I can't provide it, maybe I can find a resource for them.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, during this COVID situation, I have a lot of people calling me, emailing me, wanting me to look at pictures of things, which I will, and I will advise them of value for an economical fee, really just enough to cover my time, because I'm not going into the houses at this time.
Right.
So I just do my very best to mentor people on the phone. Sometimes a family wants a consultation. There's some bad blood between siblings, and the executor will want to talk to me about how to handle that or minimize fighting. You know, fighting is a big deal.
Yeah.
I see a lot of fighting in my career. And it's sad to me because it can be prevented with just, I call it the game plan. And it's very important to have a game plan, because when you do walk into that estate for the first time, okay, boom, this is where we need to start. And these are the people we need to call. And all of us siblings, if there are siblings, need to be on similar pages, if not the same page. And if you're an only child, then you need to reach out to professional resources that are trusted and have good reputations locally where they are.
Julie, let's talk about inheriting clutter. How did you, I mean, you are obviously an accomplished professional, you're an accomplished author. How did you bring this together? And I should just mention that, you know, this show is airing on the 12th, but the book becomes available on the 14th, so that's Tuesday. People can go to Amazon and their favorite shopping sites, I guess, to pick up the book in audio form and paperback and for your Kindle if people use Kindle. But how did you come up with putting this all together? I mean, how do you take it out of your brain and you got the wealth of information and boil it down into something that is people can read and digest?
The book is filled with amazing stories, and every single one of them is true. And, you know, I received this calling at a very young age. I was in my late 20s. That was, 30 years ago. But I got into this because I saw people getting taken advantage of by their neighbors, by their friends, by their family, and I really wanted to be an advocate. And through all the years, I would journal or blog. And I had a client of mine who was actually a literary agent. And he said, you need to write because you are a wealth of knowledge. So I just wrote freely from the heart, very compassionate. I'm a very approachable individual. And the book is an easy read because it's very conversational. And there's so many topics covered in it that really I feel proud that I've written the how-to manual. When mom and dad get to that point where you need to handle the home prior to death, or mom and dad have passed. The book even includes little love notes to the older parents, giving them suggestions on what they need to do.
Yeah, people can certainly pick that up, as I mentioned before. Well, Julie, I mean, this is amazing. I could go on for hours and hours. I really appreciate you taking some time with us this morning and talking through about how to better plan your estate. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we look forward to having you back on the program very soon.
I look forward to that as well. Thank you so much.
Welcome back. Now time to talk a little markets, and joining me on the line, he's the co-founder of Delphi Digital, Mr. Kevin Kelly. Hey, Kevin. How are you?
Hey, how you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing okay. You have a good week?
Yeah, a little bit quiet. Some people still taking off, but no, it's been good.
Yeah, well, good. I'm glad we could catch up on markets. It's been, it looks like we're back to a little volatility. Things seem to kind of calm down a little bit the past few days of the week. But you're the expert. What can you tell us? What's transpired the last 5 days post July 4th?
Yeah, well, what's certainly top of mind for investors more broadly is this kind of pickup, or just say resurgence in confirmed COVID cases. You're obviously seeing the headlines that's really kind of focused or targeted around your southern states, some of your states out west, us sitting here in New York. We went through a pretty scary period here, but all else equal, all things are going relatively well here, but it's really starting to pick up around the U.S. And I think you mentioned volatility. We're starting to see some volatility come back in the market, and I think again, just looking at the longer term outlook for where stocks are when you break down how the S&P 500 has performed, for example, and really the Nasdaq, hitting new all-time highs. I mean, it is being led by a handful of these large kind of big tech companies that, believe it or not, are the outlooks have improved for because they are benefiting from what's going on here with industry consolidation and things of that sort. And so, what I think people are starting to wake up to, and again, this goes back to the volatility point, is you're starting to see people wake up to the length and the lack of progress, I could say, on the economic front. And I don't want to make light of what's happened recently, and we are seeing a bit of a comeback in some of these economic indicators. But at the same time, you're starting to see, for example, consumer spending that rebounded initially, especially on your lower income groups, that has started to stagnate a bit. You're seeing the this kind of benefits cliff coming up at the end of July here, where some of these programs that were instituted on the fiscal policy front are set to expire, and there's a lot of debate over what's going to happen next and how much additional funding or spending is going to be needed. And so I think as you get into these summer months, there's always that common mantra, sell in May and go away, because I think you have lower volumes here in the equity markets and markets more broadly, and that could make for some violent moves going forward because there is a lot of debate, I guess you could say, on both sides. There isn't really a consensus view on exactly where markets go from here. You've got one camp saying, the worst is behind us and risk assets are headed higher. You've got others, and I would probably sit in this latter camp where I think, markets, especially, stocks are pretty priced for perfection right now, and any disruption to some of the progress that we have seen, what little progress we've seen, and again, the rising cases is really what a lot of people are focusing on right now. If you see any of that start to really regress or backtrack, I think that could increase the market volatility and expectations for it, which obviously would put a hamper on stock prices here. So again, I still think the risk is to the downside. But that being said, I mean, that's not to say there aren't bull markets somewhere, and there aren't ways in which you can make money in this space, and there are certainly still really good companies, quality companies that you can buy. I just think when you're looking at the broader market, there's a lot more have-nots than haves that are going to come out of this.
So we've got a spike in cases. I'm not sure what the death toll is. I would think that the mortality rate is much lower. But I guess we're told to expect a second wave. So doesn't the market build that into its thinking? Don't the human beings, which essentially are the market, Kevin? Because we talk about this. I'm talking about this. I don't want to talk about the market in some nebulous thing. The market is made up of humans and businesses run by humans, right? So wouldn't that already be kind of priced in to what we're seeing? I mean, we didn't think we were out of the woods with reopening, right?
Yeah, no, and it's a really good point because markets trade, right? They're discounting mechanisms, so they trade off of what future expectations are, right? So to your point, if the hypothetical second wave was priced in, then you could make the argument certainly that we could be in this renewed bull market because the worst is certainly behind us. Where I think there's a disconnect is the actual length or potential damage that will be done, not necessarily by a second wave or this resurgence of cases, but more so the economic impact and the fallout of what happened in the first wave, right? You still have, millions that are unemployed, and people look at initial jobless claims, and some have tried to cite that there's improvement there because the numbers are certainly starting to decline. When you look at things like continued claims, when you look at the amount of businesses that are going bankrupt, I mean, literally you're seeing an unprecedented amount of companies, at least here in the U.S., going bankrupt or filing for defaults or corporate downgrades. And so that again, and we talked about this, I think, a few months ago on your show, that again could create this really nasty kind of cascade or downward spiral, because you need, in order for the economy to really kind of fire on all cylinders, you need a lot of different industries and kind of the broader economy in general doing well, right? And so when you have these pockets of whether it's industries that are completely going under or companies that are completely going under, that can really easily sort of trickle into other parts of the economy because those people have cut back on consumer spending, and someone's spending is someone else's revenue, right? Someone's expenses
Mm-hmm.
are someone's revenue. So that's where I think the disconnect is and will, potentially start playing out is as the market starts to catch up to what the real actual longer term prospects for economic growth are, at least within here in the US, and then certainly in other advanced and emerging economies. I think once the market catches up to that, asset prices will certainly adjust. And again, that's just my opinion, right? And would love to actually, is one of the cases where you kind of would love to be wrong because it is a bit of a doom and gloom type outlook. But I'm not quite convinced right now, or at least at this juncture, that, we actually are out of the woods, or we have put the worst behind us, because there is still a lot of repercussions that are going to kind of spill over from that first wave and that months of business closures and things of that nature.
Well, I don't. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, and I don't think you're being doom and gloom. I think you're just being the reality. The reality is this is going to happen. We don't have a vaccine. We're not sure what's happening with schooling, with kids going back to school or college students going back to school. There's a lot of unknowns, so there is uncertainty, and there will be uncertainty. I think, like you, I choose to be optimistic and believe that we will find a vaccine and we will deal with these circumstances as we have dealt with circumstances in the past. And so that's kind of that's kind of my perspective. Kevin, I want to, one of the great things about talking with you is that we also get to talk about cryptocurrency, which is a very exciting asset class and one that continues to grow in mainstream notoriety, for lack of a better term. And wanted to check in, with your Delphi Digital hat on now. I guess it was always on, but more focus on your research that you're doing at Delphi. What's top of mind this week? I would assume lots going on in the Bitcoin and digital currency world as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it is one of those areas that I think longer term, as if you start to see some of these things we just talked about play out, I do think if you look at the kind of internet economy, again, as this emerging economy, and digital assets and crypto assets being the kind of productive resources that power that, similar like to today's commodities powering, the actual underlying economy, I think you're going to have a lot of kind of capital inflow into this space. And you're already seeing, again, a ton of innovation when it comes to Bitcoin specifically. I mean, one of the big debates right now is where that heads, right, in the short and then, the medium term. And there is this interesting kind of disconnect because you're seeing something like physical gold, right, break out above $1,800 an ounce for the first time, I think, since in over 7 years, just this week. And people saying, okay, getting even more bullish gold here. But at the same time, Bitcoin has really been trading more as a kind of risk-on asset and more in line with stocks recently. And so one of the reasons I think that is because you do have this elevated market volatility, right? So at the kind of top of the funnel, Bitcoin, unless you see market volatility kind of decline, I still think it's going to have a little bit of resistance here in the short run. But when you look at the broader space, I mean, over the last month, you've seen a really widening, I guess you'd say, of the dispersion of returns with some of these smaller alternative crypto assets, specifically in the decentralized finance or DeFi space. And so there's a lot of tokens that, yes, it's a very speculative industry and speculative market right now still, but there are some actual real tangible use cases that these things are being used for. And you're starting to see investors try and price the, kind of the long-term potential intrinsic value of these things into today's prices. And so you've seen, while Bitcoin's, traded relatively flat, I guess you could say, since the end of April, early May, you have seen some of these smaller kind of DeFi products, their native tokens, increase by 100%, some even up 200% or 2 or 3x from where they were back at the March lows. And so again, I think investors who are interested in this space, there's a ton of not only innovation that's happening, but also value capture that's really happening too. And so as you kind of start to broaden out from your conventional asset classes, and when I think investors start to realize that the expected returns there aren't quite what they've historically been, at least for the next 5 to 10 years, the appeal or the attractiveness of the digital asset space, I think, is only going to become more evident.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just reading something online that a Bitcoin billionaire or a digital currency or a cryptocurrency billionaire is now getting into the presidential race, and apparently he was an actor. He was in the Mighty Ducks. So I guess that's given the choices, I guess. Hey, what's another actor, right? Or what's
Right.
another?
Yeah, Kanye throwing his hat in.
And
So I
Kanye
mean,
throwing it. I mean, it's just
why not?
it's a crazy world we live in. But uh, the other thing I wanted to ask you about real quick, Kevin, the underlying technology, which is the blockchain. I've been reading more and more where this can undergird that technology can be used as infrastructure for other businesses, other
Hmm.
types of companies. And though it's not crypto, I have to think that you and the folks at Delphi are kind of looking at the application of blockchain and how it can be used across other business types.
Yeah, I think what'll be really interesting to see, and again, there's a bit of a longer term trend, but one I think people should really pay attention to is when you think about the internet and what the internet has lacked so far, and it's actually given rise to some of these incumbent companies like your Googles and your Facebooks of the world, is it lacks this kind of shared data underlying infrastructure, right? And so what different base layer kind of blockchains can do, like Ethereum, for example, is if it can create this, shared data layer, then the ability for people and companies to, or people to spin up companies and with different business models becomes much easier, a bit more seamless, and the operational costs are a lot less. And you can actually monetize, different data sources, similar to how the incumbents do today, but that's in a more distributed fashion, right? So again, I think what the underlying kind of public blockchains are going to be able to do is basically create that shared data layer that will allow a lot of value to get not only extracted or trickled down to the base layer and their native assets, but also a lot of value can accrue to the crypto companies that are building on top of these that are leveraging that shared data layer. Because what's great about a lot of these blockchains is they are very transparent, right? And again, you have this, it's not fully anonymous, right? Because there are different ways you can track these things, but at the same time, the way in which you can kind of aggregate this data in real time is certainly much different than and much less fragmented, I guess you could say, than how you would have to do that today. And that's why you've been able to see some of these Googles and Facebooks of the world create these massive data silos that they can monetize because they have access and a monopoly, so to speak, over that user information and user data.
Well, it really is amazing, and just from the outside looking in, it's interesting to see how the technology evolves and how the cryptocurrency space has evolved, even in such a short period of time. Well, Kevin, always a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks for the double update. Great to talk with you, and have a wonderful weekend.
You too, Jeff. Have a good one.
Welcome back, and now we're going to check in about real estate and travel. And joining me now on the line, he is the real estate and travel reporter with Market Watch, Mr. Jacob Passy. Hey, Jacob, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. It's things are a little rainy here in Manhattan, but we're going to pull through, and as long as we have our health, we've got it all, right?
Yes.
So let's jump in. What's top of mind? I know you cover both real estate and travel, but what are you thinking about this week, and what are you writing about?
Yeah. So one thing I wrote about, sort of taking off my personal finance hat a bit and going from more, kind of the investor's perspective. I did a story because Quicken Loans, or the parent company of Quicken Loans, filed to go public this week. So it's a big deal. Quicken Loans is the largest mortgage lender in the U.S., so pretty notable that they're going public. And the filing kind of provided an interesting look into, their business, their company, et cetera.
Interesting. So do tell. I mean, what did you learn? I'm assuming you did some forensic analysis and looked at some of their financials. Yeah. And what did you learn about the business?
Yeah. So one interesting thing. So a lot of folks probably know about Rocket Mortgage, which is the popular process that debuted a few years ago, in which the advertising spiel was that push button, get mortgage. They argued that they could, fulfill a mortgage application and get you a mortgage in as little as 8 minutes.
Wow.
Of course, in reality, for most people, that was not the case. It certainly depends on how much paperwork you already have lined up and things like that. But either way, it was a big deal in the industry that it debuted in 2016. They had a splashy Super Bowl ad, et cetera. These days, Rocket Mortgage and Quicken Loans are basically synonymous. I spoke with the CEO back at the beginning of the whole pandemic, got the chance to interview him, which was great. And when he and I were talking, he kind of made the point that the two are kind of, one and the same at this point. The process of Rocket Mortgage is basically the process that all Quicken Loans applications now go through. And nowadays, when you look at the branding, oftentimes it's referred to as Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans, and they're emphasizing Rocket Mortgage more and more. Mm-hmm. Well, their filing actually had an interesting, reason for that, which they didn't say there was a reason for that, but apparently they don't actually own the right to the brand Quicken Loans. So, kind of an interesting bit of history here. The company Quicken Loans today was started by Dan Gilbert and some other investors as Rock Financial back in the 80s. And then in the 90s, it was purchased, it went public. And then a few years later, it was purchased by Intuit, mm-hmm. which owns QuickBooks and other software. And at the time, Intuit had its own mortgage company called Quicken Mortgage. And so it basically merged Quicken Mortgage with Rock Loans to form Quicken Loans. Mm-hmm. And then a few years later, Gilbert bought back Quicken Loans from Intuit and, kept it private and whatnot. But Intuit retained the license to the name. So since then, Intuit has basically, Rocket Holdings, I guess is the name of the company, or Rock Holdings, has been paying licensing fees to Intuit, and they are coming up with an agreement to purchase the rights to the Quicken Loans name in 2022. But until then, theoretically, basically the kind of risk statements in their S1 filing with the SEC pointed out that, if they do various things wrong, quote unquote, Intuit could decide to, discontinue their license to use the name Quicken Loans. So that kind of explains why we're seeing more of Rocket Mortgage. So that was kind of an interesting thing. And it's interesting and notable when you're looking at it as the company from a financial perspective because, as the largest mortgage lender in the country, the name Quicken Loans is important. That is the brand. And a lot of their intangible assets as a company are tied up in their branding. Mm-hmm. And so, if they suddenly were to lose access to the company's name, that would be a major stumbling block for them.
Yeah, and you certainly see a lot of ads online referring to Quicken Mortgage, and they are number one. They build themselves as America's number one mortgage lender. So if they go to a completely different brand, it's like basically restarting the company or not restarting the company, but just kind of losing that cachet that they have gotten. Certainly, I guess that's like an interesting conundrum to have to deal with, and I'm sure that they thought about it before going public. Jacob, I wanted to ask you though, what does being the number one mortgage lender mean in the terms of like all this interest rate volatility that we've had? I know in previous conversations we've talked about mortgage rates being the lowest in history, and then the next week when I talk to you, it's now the lowest mortgage rates in history. But what are the implications to this type of deal when you're so dependent on interest rates?
No, that's a great question. So Quicken Loans kind of spelled out their interest rate exposure in, the filing, and it presents a kind of questionable picture, as opposed to other companies that, Quicken Loans, unlike, Wells Fargo, who they supplanted as the largest mortgage lender back in 2018, according to Inside Mortgage Finance, which is a news outlet that tracks the origination volumes across, the biggest mortgage lenders in the country and comes up with a ranking. Unlike a company like Wells Fargo, which has various business lines to fall back on, Quicken Loans does not have that. Now, the greater parent company that's going public does. So, Quicken Loans itself, which is by far the largest subsidiary, they are in the mortgage business, but some of the other subsidiaries that this company owns include ForSaleByOwner.com, Rocket Homes, both of which are, home listing websites. It includes Rocket Loans, which is a personal loan provider, and various other businesses. So the company is varied. But when you're looking at a mortgage lender like Quicken Loans, they are a non-bank lender, and that is notable for a few reasons. One of the biggest being that they are super reliant on the ability to sell their loans on the secondary market, and so they hold, and then they also do servicing themselves, but they don't have deposits and things like that to fall back on in terms of, when times are tough or other business lines. And that's notable because, they pointed out that, they spelled out, what portion of their business is refinancing versus, home purchase activity. And they do way more refinancing than most other mortgage lenders. They are, it was only 27%, I want to say, of the loans they do were for purchase mortgages, which is, a mortgage used to buy a home. Otherwise, the other, 73% was refinancing, which is a really high volume. Part of that's because they have really good retention, because of how easy the process is, and they are, I think a lot of their customers are probably pretty happy with their, mortgage process. They do a really good job of retaining clients, so folks who refinance are more likely to refinance with them than to go to another lender. But still, when interest rates are down like this, it spurs a lot of refinance activity, which is what we've seen. The issue is twofold, though. One, if rates go up, that refinancing activity is going to dry up very quickly, and that's going to be a lot less business for them. And you can kind of see that in their financials. This year they're, on track to, I think, double their revenue compared to a year ago when rates were much higher than they are now. And so that kind of shows you, how much of a benefit they can get from low rates, but also, the risks there. There's another risk, though, to low rates, which is rates can stay low for a really long time, but at a certain point, you're going to have tapped out the market of people who are looking to refinance. Eventually, most people will either, will have refinanced already, and, rates dropping, a fraction of a percent is not necessarily enough for them to want to refinance again. Or, let's say they're 15 years into a 20-year loan, it probably doesn't make sense for them to refinance, so they're probably not even going to consider it to begin with. So when you're in that, realm, even if rates keep going down, it may not, there's diminishing returns on that. It also affects their purchase loan business. Home buyers are flooding back into the market right now, in large part because of how low mortgage rates are. Mortgage rates are so low that it's, bringing people off of the sidelines. The issue then is if rates go up at all, far fewer people are going to be able to afford to buy a home. And then you find yourself again in a situation where, the origination volume of loans is going to drop. And then it affects yet another part of their business, which is they hold mortgage servicing rights. And basically those are the rights to, collect the servicing payments and, some fees and stuff like that. But there's interest rate risk there because of, if rates go down more and people do decide to refinance, then you're going to see, high levels of prepayments. So if you're holding the servicing rights for a loan where someone decides to refinance that loan, you lose those servicing rights, and so you're kind of out of that, those payments that you were expecting to get in the future. There are usually some, oftentimes there are prepayment penalties and things like that, or you might have to pay a fee to refinance to pay off, the existing loan and things like that. It's not like you're losing all the money, but still, you're not getting those kind of monthly payments that you were expecting as a servicer.
Yeah. Well,
so.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's every aspect of their business basically is sensitive to interest rates, which is really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, they've been successful, I guess. Look, they've been successful for many reasons. Now, like many businesses, they have to adapt to what's happening in the environment. And I guess it'll be interesting when the initial public offering actually happens and people, will they get
Yeah.
a lot of interest? I think people will be dissecting all those financials and thinking about some of the things that you articulated. Jacob, it's amazing work this week. Always a pleasure chatting with you. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, and hope you have some great weather up there in Maine.
You too. Stay dry. Take care.
Bye-bye. Welcome back, and now we're going to end the show as we always do with a visit from the Legal Eagles, David Levine, Kevin Walsh. Both are principals with Groom Law Group, an employee benefits law firm based in Washington, D.C. Gentlemen, how are you doing this week?
We're doing well this week, Jeff. Thanks for having us on. We successfully made it through the 4th of July, and now we're dealing with kind of DOL's rapid regulatory agenda as we approach the dog days of summer.
Rapid regulatory agenda. Go ahead, David.
Wait. I got to ask, Kevin, you're focused on that. Last thing you told me is you're like, all right, my next big holiday I have to prep for is Thanksgiving, and you're working on learning how to deep fry a turkey.
Well, I want to learn how to deep fry a turkey, but I've always wanted to do that. Is there any holiday where a deep fried turkey is inappropriate?
That's true. So, maybe we should go back to the DOL. You're right.
Well, I don't even know how to segue to this, but I'm just going to try anyway. David, lots going on. Kevin mentioned it, rapid deployment of new regulations from the Department of Labor, one of which I think are PEPs, or at least the RFI for PEPs, MEPs, and SEPs. I can't think of anything else. So PEPs. So what can you tell us? What's going on?
Well, the rapid reaction to regulation is as follows. We're trying for like the triple R. We're coming up with new terms, Jeff.
Yep.
All right. Coming up very soon is the Department of Labor's deadline to the response to their request for information on PEPs. I know we've talked about MEPs and PEPs a million times with you, so we're not going to go through the basics. But the key here is the Department of Labor is asking, what should we do, if anything, on regulations for PEPs? And there's a lot of stuff out there. And Kevin, I can tell you, we're working with everybody from advisors, record keepers, sponsors who are interested, saying, do I want to be in a pooled employer plan when these things go live in 21 or later? And there's a lot of questions. The DOL has a long list of items, and I'm not going to bore you by reading them. But I thought I'd talk about a couple key things that are high on people's lists right now. One is, if you're a PEP provider, how do you register? Because you're supposed to register as one. We're waiting for the DOL to come out with something on that. I know they're working on it, but everybody wants to know. I'm thinking that probably is a bit of a tempest in a teapot. It's probably not that big a deal because there'll be hopefully a relatively straightforward, simple system. But bigger issue that everybody seems to be grappling with really relates to who plays what role in the design. Under the Secure Act, a plan sponsor is still considered, an employer is still considered a plan sponsor for a number of purposes, except to the extent that in our acronym world, the pooled plan provider, the triple P, has responsibility or it's outsourced to someone. Mm-hmm. So everybody's trying to figure out is, okay, who is the main plan sponsor of a PEP? Is it each employer? Is it the pooled plan provider? Can it be someone else? Hopefully, I think we're going to be seeing some comments on that, number one. Number two, there's a lot of question, and we're not going to take a hard and fast position on today's discussion. But there's a question of, okay, what if someone wears multiple hats? What if you want to be the pooled plan provider that pulls it all together, but you also want to do investment management? How do you get paid? Do you use existing exemptions? Is there a need for more exemptive relief? The Department of Labor is asking, and there's lots of schools of thought out there, and it's going to be interesting to see where the Department of Labor comes down in this process. A third thing that I think is really out there right now is there are a lot of MEPs and PEPs out there already. MEPs out there already, whether from PEOs or from just large employers who have multiple employer plans or affiliated MEPs. And I think there's a lot of interest in saying to the DOL, please, our old plans have worked for a long time. You don't need to change the rules on those. The association retirement plan rules were good about leaving those untouched, but I think that's the thing. But the big way I close up my part and toss to Kevin in a second is we have way too many acronyms now. We have PEP, MEP, PPP, PEO. We can keep giving terms. I think maybe we should do one of our weekly discussions actually on the concept of acronyms, so we can actually explain what they all mean. But that's just my 2 cents. Kevin, what do you think?
I mean, I think you're making great points, David, and I know that you were trying to make turkey references, but I don't think any of these rules or proposals are turkeys in themselves. But I think it's important that we get guidance on these things in a hurry. I know that Jeff's talked about PEPs, MEPs, SEPs, and any other 3-letter acronyms we can come up with. But if we want to close the coverage gap and we want to have these things operational by 2021. We need to see kind of real fast action from the department. David, go on, Jeff?
Well, I was going to say, are we confident that, well, I don't know, in terms of the timeline, this RFI gets completed, and then will we see something back in some period of time? There's a lot going on, obviously, with the CARES Act and extending circumstances for COVID, but is it anticipated we'll get something before the end of the year?
So I think when we look at the CARES Act and the risk of getting, or the likelihood of getting this by the end of the year, I think it's informative to look at the lifetime income proposal that's currently over at OMB. Mm-hmm. They've sent it over there as an interim final rule, and it looks like they're trying to use it as an interim final rule because Congress set a short deadline for how quickly the department's supposed to get that rule out. Here, where the goal is to have PEPs operational by 2021, I wouldn't be totally shocked to see the Department of Labor issue interim final rules, kind of despite the APA challenges, because going through notice and comment rulemaking, going proposal and then final between here and January, it just doesn't seem likely or really all that viable.
And to your point, Kevin, I think the DOL in the last 40 days has issued more guidance than they have in a very long time. So it is actually amazing. And Kevin, you may have comments on all the different things to comment on in a moment, but I got to tell you, if they can accomplish that much in this little time, I wouldn't assume that they can't get it done.
Well, yeah, we've had a real flood of guidance, and it's going to be a challenge for the regulator community, for plan sponsors, for interested participants, for everyone involved, to weigh in the tight deadlines the department's given.
Yeah, excellent. Well, guys, I want to thank you so much. Really interesting. Thanks for the deep dive and a look at Capitol Hill and what's going on the regulatory front. Enjoy your weekend, and of course, we'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks for having us on.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, that wraps up this episode of the BRN Sunday podcast. I want to thank Julie Hall for breaking down estate planning. Really amazing, really important topic. Hopefully, you got a lot out of that. I hope you got a lot out of all of our great contributors. They make time out of their busy schedules to do this. They're not paid. They just donate their time. I want to thank all of them. And of course, I want to thank you, our audience, because you check us out each and every week, and our audience is growing. Don't forget, we're back on television tomorrow on the BRN AM show, and I'll be joined by Lou Minsky. He's the president and CEO of the Defined Contribution Institutional Investment Association, or DCIA. So until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving. Don't forget, roll with the changes.